the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to have with me Wendy Samford. Wendy, could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Sure, Alison. Thanks for having me. My name is Wendy Samford. I am a mom and a grandma and a wife, and I am also a writer. In my past life, I was in education in background. I switched to university teaching, and now I write full-time.
Wendy, we spoke a couple years ago, right after you were a victorious member of the Royal Palm Literary Awards. Congratulations on that.
Thank
you.
That
book was Bloom Where Planted, and I believe it had a profound message in it. Could you recap just a little bit about what that message was?
Sure. It was a book about my daughter-in-law's life. We wrote under pen names when we did that book because at the time my granddaughter was in middle school, and middle school's hard enough to get through without having a book written about your mom's life. She grew up in foster care and had a very, very, insane childhood, and just her as an adult, and a memoir about her life and the effects that growing up in that kind of a situation had upon her adult life.
And from what I understand, looking at your website, and I know what you have coming forward in your next book, this conversation that you've had with your daughter-in-law on paper, in person, had a profound effect on you.
Correct. Well, it did. I've written books before. I've contributed to many books, and I've written two, but my first two books were about over-testing in the United States, over-testing of kids in schools. So I am I lean more of an academic side. And then I felt very much called to write a book about my daughter-in-law's life. That was Bloom Where Planted, which was way out of my league. I had no idea about foster care, so I had to do a whole lot of research, reading, and catching up to do justice with that book. And now this next book, it's the same, just with different people, more people, same topic.
About the foster care system.
It's about the foster care system, just really about the effects of trauma, childhood trauma, how that affects our brain and how it affects us as adults. And mostly, if there's one thing that the book is about, or why I write about it, is that we should try to accept people where they are, because we don't know where they're coming from. So.
Such a true statement. I will totally agree with the idea that we just don't know anyone else's journey, and it's not for us to judge the journey that they're on and where they are standing, where they bloom when planted, right?
Absolutely.
But so you mentioned that you had to do a lot of research. Could you tell me about, how did you do the research? How did you start? I'm sure a lot of people in our audience have been in situations where all of a sudden they're in over their head with the information they should know, but they don't. So how do you begin?
Yeah, a good dear friend of mine that I wrote my second book with, Rosie Gornick, and she used to say, "Oh, their nose is over their skis," when she would meet someone that was a little out of their league, which is kind of funny. I love that. But I just started reading. I am a crazy reader person. So I started reading. And then once you start reading, of course, you see all the references in those books. And so you read those books and then talk and talk and talk. And I just did a ton of volunteering at different agencies with different foster placements, so that I could get a feel for this new world that I was trying to enter into. And even I'm not used to writing memoirs. I write nonfiction books about testing. So even writing memoirs, I had to read books about how to write memoirs, and then just tons of WebEx. I am constantly watching WebEx things to learn more from people that have more experience than I do in these things. So this is a long journey. It's taken 4 years that I've been writing memoirs now. So I feel a lot more comfortable in what I know and what I'm presenting to people. So more confidence for sure.
So the new book is about the trauma that people experience primarily through the foster care system, or is it a broader topic?
No, it's actually, I started meeting some of April's friends, my daughter-in-law's friends from writing the last book. And then it just grew. To say this is a God adventure would be an understatement I mean, he has just totally led and presented people to me that I didn't know. They're from all different states in the United States. And our paths crossed and they volunteered to share their stories with me. So the book is 4 different people that grew up in foster care, and they are adults now. So it was their experiences and then how that relates to them as adults. And then in between the chapters, I always write 7 chapters because that's a good Bible number. So the in between chapters, there are 3, and I interview people that volunteer. I interview people that are foster parents, and I interview people that are first responders to give, first to lighten up the subject, first of all, because of course it's a heavy subject, but also to show the opposing side, that there are people trying to better this system and they work really hard to do so, and they're like angels. That's all I can say.
You bring up a really interesting point about writing on serious topics, is adding a little bit of levity and breaking up that heaviness. What are ways that you would recommend doing that for people?
Well, do you mean reading or writing?
No, you indicated in your chapters that they're heavy subjects, but that you would like to add a little bit of humor into it.
Well, I think people that have lived through these things they have a really big sense of humor. I mean, because you have to at some point. So there are funny things. I mean, there are very heavy things and terrible things, but there's also things that are very funny. And I mean, the overall thing is they survived. They look at themselves as complete survivors of things. And there's a lot of, I think, even especially in the first responders chapter, because those people's jobs, oh my goodness gracious, wow, they do not make enough money, and the turnover rate shows that. But it's a really honest look at what's going on in this system in the United States, not just in my state of Florida.
How do you sit down and piece together all the parts that you develop through your research, through your interviews? There's got to be some sort of system that you use to keep it straight.
That is so funny you said that, because when it's taken me 1.5 years to write this book, I hope that it's out by Christmas this year. But when people talk, when you interview people, as I'm sure you will know, people skip around. They don't start at one spot and then keep going to they're 2 years old and 3 years old. They're all over the place. And so there are huge chunks of information I'm constantly cutting and pasting and moving, and then editing and then sending back to them, and they edit and send back to me. So it's a real labor of love for people to volunteer to share these stories, because it's a great deal of work when you're interviewing people, just because our brains don't go linear in a fashion all the time. So it's challenging and fun, and you have to really take some breaks and play with your dog and do some things that are more normal, just to keep yourself on the straight and narrow, and be gentle and kind to yourself when you're writing and when you're telling these stories.
I find it interesting that you're right, when people bounce around with their memories, and I've written memoirs as well, and it's a lot of cut and paste. I would keep chapters of this happened at this particular time, like chapters, files, right? So you have a file of this time, and then you have to put them together somehow, string them along.
Yes, exactly. It's to keep a timeline. It's very difficult when you first start, because and sometimes, especially when you're working with people that have had trauma, they a lot of times they don't remember things until they're talking about it. So you're digging up things as people talk through them, and so it goes off in different areas sometimes. So it's an interesting thing how our brains work. That's what the First Wrinkle, the name of the book, is about our brains, and how that it works to protect ourselves almost when we're injured. There are different areas that just kind of close up. And so I think people that worked with me discovered a lot about themselves as they were talking and sharing their problems and their victories. So,
working as a memoirist, did you fall into the trap of feeling like a psychologist at times?
I don't think so. I really try to just let the story unfold as people say. My background, I have my PhD, but my background is in, adult change. That's what my dissertation is about. So I feel like I know a little bit about brain research and how our brains work as adults and how difficult it is for change to really come about. So I study sustained change, not just, so I'm going to change a little bit and I'm going to go back to this way, but how do we keep and stay in this changed manner? So it's been a passion of mine forever and continues to be so.
So your biggest recommendation would be become a really good listener.
It's good listening and good asking questions, a lot of questions, so that you can guide people on what they really are trying to get out. Sometimes we don't even know. So we really worked together, learned together, and grew together, all the people that contributed in the book.
Do you have people that have heard about the topic you write and have asked you to help them write their own story?
I have a couple people have gone through, and a couple people have asked me to just read over, and just comment on what they're writing. True confessions, I am the world's worst speller, man. It is bad. I am telling you, I can't believe I turned out to be a writer, because my secretary from my other job would have said, what? She knows all my secrets. So when I critique something or someone asks me to read something that they've written, it's really, I look at the overall picture and what are you trying to say and where are you trying to head with it, and are you really staying on task? I also like to really stay with almost character development, like, I read nonfiction, and some of the people in my writers group write fiction. So just trying to stay with, would that person really do that? Or that seems off for that person. So I think I can contribute that way when I'm asked to read something and critique something for others.
Wendy Samford, how could people find out more about you, about your research, about your upcoming book?
My website is really well developed, which I'm very proud of. I have a guy that does it. He's wonderful. The website is www.wsamford.com. It's SAMFORD.com.
Well, Wendy, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
I'm ready. I can handle it.
We'll start with a really easy one. Are you a coffee drinker?
No, tea.
Tea. Do you do pinky up?
No, I love coffee, but I can't have caffeine. I'm already crazy enough.
If life were a video game, what role would you play?
Oh, I'm so not a gamer. Oh boy, I have no idea. I'd be sitting in the background just clapping. I'd be the cheerleader. Yay, you did good.
And there you go. The cheerleader in the back of the Mario Kart game, right?
Yeah, Yay! Yeah. I know where my gifts are and I know where they are not as well.
And then finally, what are some fun ways to answer a question? How's it going?
Well, I guess you can be like what a lot of the people these days say, fine, or geez, oh man, really? You're gonna, that's funny, the answers you get these days, because we're all just hanging in there, I think, by a thread with the crazy going on in the world. But we sure have a sense of humor, people, and I think there's a whole lot more good than bad, and that's a good thing.
Wendy Samford, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Alison. I appreciate it.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Boom! We're all done. Wendy Samford worked in the K-12 setting as an administrator for 13 years, higher education for 8 years, and has been writing and contributing to books for 6 years. Her passion lies in working to support children of all ages, no matter where that direction may lead. She wrote The First Wrinkle as a follow-up to Bloom Where Planted and hopes to continue to share honest stories of those who grew up in the foster care system in the United States. The message, her biggest message, let's not judge people as they journey through life. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us on the web at floridawriters.org.